Tottenham Hotspur versus Nottingham Forest this Sunday at 6 p.m. has become a huge game in terms of Spurs' rest of the season. After the 1-1 draw against West Ham at the London Stadium, it just means that there's pressure on us before we go into that run of difficult games after the Forest game, starting at Newcastle and taking in Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea. All those big games we still have to come in the last 7 after the Nottingham Forest game. So in this episode of the Spurred On podcast, I'll be talking about this Forest game as a match preview and how important it is in terms of our rest of the season. So let's get started, and I'll start by talking about the reverse fixture at the City Ground earlier this season. It was a 2-0 victory. And interestingly, compared to where we are at the moment, starting with our forward line of Timo Werner, Heung-min Son and Brennan Johnson on the right, back then we had Richarlison in the 9, Sonny on the left and Decky Kulusevski starting on the right. And actually it was one of Kulusevski's best games of this season. He got the assist for the first goal with a beautiful left-footed trademark Decky Kulusevski cross, which Richarlison nodded home from 6 yards out. It was towards the beginning of Richarlison's unbelievable form where he scored 9 in 10 or 9 or 11. And Kulusevski's flat, pacey cross was exactly what we needed, and a good finish by Richarlison. And actually, I talked about it in my earlier episode this week, where at the end of that West Ham game the other day, Kulusevski came on and put in a flat cross that West Ham struggled to deal with. And I do wonder whether Ange Postecoglou will be thinking, should I change this and offer ourselves something different and bring Richarlison back in as the 9 and Kulusevski on the right to put those crosses in? I personally think it's kind of an either-or situation now with Spurs. If we're going to start Kulusevski, then it's worth starting Richarlison, so we've got that kind of aerial threat and his crossing threat. But if you're going to start Werner and Johnson, then you play Son in the 9, because then you'll get those goals that we've been scoring a lot recently, getting to the byline, cutbacks across the front with the far post forward coming in to score from the assist of the near post forward. The second goal against Forest at the City Ground was Kulusevski himself. It was a poor kick out, if you remember, from the Nottingham Forest goalkeeper. Came to Kulusevski, and very rarely do you see Kulusevski take it onto his right foot and have a swing, but he did, and it went through the keeper at the near post. What you may not remember from that game as well is that Yves Bissouma then managed to get his second red card of the season, a straight red this time, with a mistimed kind of block challenge that he ended up studding into the Forest player's knee. As a result, we lost him for the entirety of, he was going to the African Cup of Nations anyway, but we basically didn't see him play for Spurs for about 6 weeks. And let's face it, Bissouma's form has never reached the heights that it was previously since then, which has been disappointing and has started making me wonder whether Ange will be looking at other number 6 options in the summer. Okay, so let's look at where Nottingham Forest are this season so far. 17th in the Premier League, won 7, drawn 8, lost 16. That's a lot of losses. However, don't forget, they've also had to deal with a 4 points deduction due to their inability to comply with the profit and sustainability rules. They're currently appealing that, but whether they'll get any of those points back, who knows. They're 3 ahead of Luton in 18th. So this is a big game for Forest as well, and they've just come off the back of their first win in a while against Fulham at home. Fulham, a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde side, obviously put us to the sword easily at Craven Cottage, but they are a much softer touch away from home. As you know, if you watch my match previews, I like to look at where the teams are in terms of where they'll be playing this game against Spurs. And of course, they're away. They're coming to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. So it's worth looking at where Forest are in the away form table this season. 1 place below their actual Premier League spot. They're in 18th in the away table, having won only 2 on their travels, drawn 4 and lost 9. You'd like to think that means Spurs would be heavy favourites at home. Forest not coming to Spurs with a lot of confidence on their travels realistically. So can Spurs start quickly as they did against West Ham and hopefully get the first goal again, but not only that, then follow it up with a second and then relax, make Forest come at us and then pick them off with our pace down the sides. In terms of where Spurs are in the Premier League at the moment, 5th, as you well know. Won 17, drawn 6, lost 7. 4 of those 7 have been at home, but we haven't lost any at home since that run post the Chelsea game where we had the Well, that's not true. Sorry, we lost Wolves, but most of Wolves at home a month or two ago. But we've lost most of those games in that run after the Chelsea game where we had suspensions and injuries. So what I'm trying to say is really I feel like our home form has been pretty strong all season. As I mentioned, 5th in the league, 2 points behind Villa, who got absolutely thumped at the Etihad this week, 4-1 by Manchester City. That just shows to me exactly how well we did when we went to the Etihad to draw 3-3 when we had Emerson Royal and Ben Davies as our centre-halves, who both did a sterling job in that game. Like I've said a few times this season, I think we play better against those teams who really come at us. Think about how well we did at the Emirates. Think how well we did at the Etihad. Think how well we played against Chelsea in that opening kind of 20 minutes. And think about how we beat Liverpool at home, even though there was, of course, that VAR error that Liverpool blame still to this day for pretty much everything negative, although they're having an absolutely brilliant season. In the Premier League home table, Spurs are 6th, won 11, drawn none, lost 4. So no draws really at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Not going to try and jinx it, but I wouldn't be putting draw on your betting coupon this week. Let's look into Nottingham Forest's recent away results. 1-1 at Luton. Before that, they lost 1-0 at Brighton. Brighton play a similar kind of style to us, very proactive, very front foot, so that bodes well. They lost 4-2 at Villa, similarly. Villa, when they're playing at home, except for when they played us actually and tried to change it, they usually play front foot and try and get at teams, so I think that is good news for us as well. 1-1 at Bournemouth. They lost 3-2 at Brentford, and their last victory at away from home in the Premier League was actually at Newcastle 6 away games ago. So a long time ago. And as we know, Newcastle have had compared to last season anyway, an absolutely appalling season. As we know, they've been decimated with injuries, as have Liverpool, as have Spurs at times this season. But Newcastle have really dealt with it almost as badly as your Man Uniteds and your Chelseas. Really poor season for them, and they're really kind of grappling to try and find a way, I think, into the Europa Conference League this season. While I think about it, by the way, how funny was it last night to see Manchester United manage to lose from a winning position at Chelsea? You never want to support Chelsea in any position or any situation, but actually I think it did Spurs a real favour for Chelsea to somehow find a winner in the last seconds of the game against Manchester United. It enables Spurs to, if they beat Forest this weekend, really pull out, I think, an unassailable lead in terms of points over Manchester United. So, yeah, I think we've got to be delighted that Chelsea found a way yesterday, although, like I said, never good to have to support Chelsea at any point. Must talk about the fact that this is Nuno Espirito Santo's return to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium since he was manager for that very short time a few years ago. Clearly a nice man, but also he was kind of given a poison chalice at that point. He was by no means the number one choice. In fact, I don't think he was even on the list of choices at the time. And Spurs couldn't get a manager through the door. It was a record amount of time that Spurs were hunting for a new manager. And in the end, it was the day before pre-season when Nuno was appointed. He came in, he didn't look like he believed he could do the job. And then, other than the first 3 games which we won, he then showed that really he couldn't do the job. He's a very counter-attacking manager. If you remember, when he was Spurs manager, after those first 3 games, there was a period where we went hundreds of minutes basically without a shot on target, and it was very, very depressing. And in the end, Daniel Levy had to kind of put him out of his misery. He was just a bit too passive, and a good friend of mine, Martin, who'll be watching or listening to this, he actually had Nuno Espirito Santo in his shop buying a microwave from him, and I think this kind of tells a story. Nuno Espirito Santo tried to walk out of the shop with the microwave just in his hands, and he was going to walk home with it to his new house in North London. And my good friend Martin, what a lovely guy, said to him, "Nuno, I'm a Spurs fan, I'd love to give you a lift home," and he did so. But I think it says something. Maybe it says something about his being grounded as a man, Nuno Espirito Santo. Maybe it's a positive that he was going to walk his microwave home out of the shop through North London. But I think it paints a slightly bleak picture, personally. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. Team news for this game: Brennan Johnson was obviously taken off with a bit of a knock at West Ham, so he's doubtful, but he said in an interview that he's confident he'll be able to play. Nottingham Forest are missing Bolly, Tavares and Owonyi. They're definitely out. I think Tottenham Hotspur's team will be this: Vicario, Pedro Porro, Destiny Udogie, Mickey van der Ven and Christian Romero. I thought Udogie was back to his bristling, powerful best against West Ham. Really thought he was excellent, and it was good to see Pedro Porro getting some shooting chances as well. I'd said the week before the West Ham game, maybe even in the preview, that I felt like we needed to get Pedro Porro in more shooting positions, and actually we did in that game. So that bodes well. So that's my back four. Then I'm going to say stick with Bissouma. I think Bentancur will keep his place over Sarr, because I think Bentancur had one of his best games of the season as well. Apart from that time he tried to cross his own goal and got nothing on it and set up a chance for West Ham. But other than that, I thought he was really excellent. And then James Maddison, I think, will start again as well. I know he was taken off after 60 minutes, but I think that's because Ange knew, because we're playing 3 games in a week, and Madders is still kind of coming back from injury. And then I think he'll stick with Werner on the left, Sonny in the middle, and if Brennan Johnson is fit, I think he'll start on the right. But if Johnson isn't fit, then I would be tempted to play Deki Kulusevski on the right, Richarlison in the 9, and Sonny on the left. Let me know in the comments what your team would be. Do you think I've got it right? Sometimes I get it very wrong. My prediction for this game, I'm going to go for 3-1 Tottenham Hotspur, but if you're betting people, I would go for half-time Nottingham Forest, full-time Tottenham Hotspur, and 3-1. I think you'll get some very, very decent odds on that. Guys, thank you so much for listening and watching as ever. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for your support. Please do go over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, press subscribe or follow there. It's really helpful to me, and vice versa. If you're listening on the podcast platforms, please come over to YouTube, youtube.com/@BarnabySlater_. Drop me a subscribe and a like. And also, you can become a Spurred On Pro member or a Patreon member. All the details in the description box. Only £1 a month. Really helps support me to make this content for you. Let me know in the comments what you think the score will be on Sunday. Come on, you Spurs.